Well, listen, I did my best. I had the LJ glasses ready. I had the big Dub hat ready, but unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. And this was an incredible result, honestly. And people, I think, on the ESPN broadcast said that there was a stunned silence in the room. It wasn't silent. People were laughing at the idea that not only that the Dallas Mavericks got the number one overall pick after trading Luka Doncic, but that both the Philadelphia 76ers and the Spurs jumped up into the top three. The rich just absolutely getting richer. It was an incredible result.
Doug, the lottery is supposed to help teams regardless of market, get better through the draft. And especially when you're a mid market like Charlotte is, that is tough to do when you are constantly losing in this system. I know, people are hurt here. Hornets fans have been hurt so many times before. Is this the system the NBA should continue to use?
I think it's a system that is supposed to prevent teams from doing the thing that teams are still doing, honestly. And I mean, less so the Hornets, because I think the Hornets have just been the victims of injury luck or injury bad luck. But certainly, I mean, teams like the Jazz and the Wizards who fell below the Charlotte Hornets, those are teams that were actively losing in order to increase their odds. So, I mean, I think the system is working as intended. It'll be interesting, though, because if you look at the history of the draft, I mean, I think they have oscillated between, giving teams. I mean, if you look at the early drafts in the mid 80s, those were just flat odds across the board. And then they went to the system where you had like 25% odds of getting the first overall pick if you were the last team, and that was too much. So they've kind of gone back and forth and trying to find a balance between giving all of these lottery teams a chance and then helping teams that are just legitimately bad acquire talent. And I think what's interesting, too, is that as you have kids coming out younger, it's much more difficult to project how those players are actually going to play. So, even obviously getting Cooper Flagg would have accelerated things, but it's going to be difficult, I think, 3 to 7 to all the way to 14 to the bottom of the lottery to really determine like how much of an impact those players are going to have until like 2 or 3 years down the road. It's not like it used to be where guys were coming out year 3, year 4 of college, and so you had a true idea, of those top picks of how they're going to impact things. So it's interesting. It's just a lot different.
All right, so you and Walker Mail, as always, are going to host Locked On Hornets tomorrow. You guys put it out every day. It's great stuff. But how much of tomorrow's episode and how many days this week are going to be spent on like how much this hurts? Because you build it up, you have top odds tied with 2 other teams, obviously, and yet again for the Charlotte Hornets, it doesn't happen. Like, how long is it going to take to get over that for some fans?
I don't know that fans. I think fans are numb at this point. I mean, they're certainly disappointed, but this has happened so many times. I mean, the Hornets have dropped positions in the draft many times, and then you take into account too that even when they've gotten lucky and moved up for LaMelo Ball and moved up for Brandon Miller, while those 2 players are obviously talented, both of them have been struck by the injury bug, and so we haven't seen sort of the full elevation of that talent with the franchise yet. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult time to be a Hornets fan. I think the good news is they didn't drop to 7, and I say that's good news because if you look at the teams that moved to 2 and 3, San Antonio, Philadelphia, you may have already talked about this. It's great for them that they moved up, but like if you're San Antonio, Dylan Harper's sitting there at 2, and you're thinking to yourself, well, we got 2 point guards and Stephon Castle and De'Aaron Fox, so they're probably going to move that pick. Philadelphia, you're at 3. I think if you were at 1 or 2, you take that pick. But if you're at 3, a lot of question marks around some of the wing players there. Maybe they decide to trade out and add some veteran talent alongside Joel Embiid and Paul George, who they have a lot of sunk cost in already. So, I'm going to speak. I think, Walker and I will speak to the pain tomorrow. There's obvious pain, but there are opportunities if the Hornets do want to move up to 2 or 3 to trade up if that's what they're interested in. I think they have flexibility right now.
All right, so that'll lead me to my next and second to last question for you. If the Hornets were to make such a move, and they have a couple second-round picks to play with, and they have future firsts. Who would you want them to target in that range, that 2 to 3 range?
Yeah, so I mean, if they move up to 2, the obvious pick is Dylan Harper, a guy who can get downhill, very reminiscent of Cade Cunningham. That's the pro comp that I think a lot of people like, and I think he would perfectly complement what LaMelo Ball does well and what he's still struggling with or still working on, which is honestly getting downhill and finishing at the rim. That's a weakness for LaMelo Ball that he continues, I think, to try to improve upon. But I think adding someone next to him that can do that, and Dylan Harper, I mean, that's his go-to skill offensively, would be a great compliment both to him and Brandon Miller. It allows Brandon Miller to stay out on the wing and do what he does best, which is shoot threes. It gives someone for LaMelo to work with in the backcourt and a threat to take some pressure off of him. I mean, how many times do we see teams throwing doubles and triples his way? And then if you're at 3, I think it's really interesting because, Ace Bailey is someone that I think a lot of people look at his wingspan and they look at some of the shots that he created for himself and they see some star potential. I'm not as big on Ace Bailey for the Hornets in particular, because I think they need players that are physical, that play physical, and I didn't see that much from him at Rutgers. So I think a lot of people are projecting him at 3. I think if the Hornets were to move up to 3, I think they would be better off looking at somebody like Trey Johnson or VJ Edgecombe, or even taking a flyer on a guy like Carter Bryant. I mean, that's probably a little too high for Carter Bryant, but I think VJ Edgecombe at 3 makes a lot of sense. VJ Edgecombe at 4 makes a lot of sense. So does Trey Johnson. So the good news is, if the Hornets had fallen to 7, things would have gotten very difficult for them in terms of finding a player that actually fit a need. Even at 4, they can find that player.
All right, so yeah, that's my next question. You kind of presented the 2 guys that maybe would be there at 4 in Johnson and Edgecombe. If it's Flagg and Harper and Bailey at 1, 2, and 3, and the Hornets are sitting there at 4, would you go with one of those 2 players? And if you were making the pick, which one would you go with?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's getting a little louder in here. Say again,
yeah.
Which of the 1, 2, 3?
So I mean, if it's Flagg and then the 2 kids from Rutgers off the board, who would you want at 4?
I am a little higher on Trey Johnson just because I think people are sleeping a little bit on his defensive abilities. I think that, Texas I don't think they were the best defensive team. So I think if you get him around Charles Lee and the system that he's trying to set up in Charlotte, I'm actually a little bit higher on his defense than a lot of people are. And I think this is how it makes sense of Trey Johnson versus Edgecombe. I have more of a belief that Trey Johnson can be an okay defender than I believe that VJ Edgecombe can be like an impact offensive player.
Yep.
And the Hornets, they definitely need more defense. There's no doubt about that. But they also need more shooting. And Trey Johnson, the way he comes off of screens, the way that he gets himself open for 3-point shots and then knocked them down at Texas, I mean, I just think he would be a very exciting prospect. And everything that I hear is that when this guy does workouts, it just goes 100%. And, if you look at last year's draft, they fell in love with Tijon Salon. And obviously they fell in love with like his physical profile and the way he could shoot the basketball for a guy his size and the way he could move in transition. But he was a raw prospect. They really fell in love with the guy who was going to work his tail off to be a better player. They said that over and over again, that they really fell in love with the work ethic. And so, I wonder if Trey Johnson or VJ Edgecombe, if they come in and they really nailed that aspect of it. I think when you're talking about two wing players who could impact your team in different ways, it might come down to some of those intangibles. Who's going to fit that Hornets DNA more? It'll be really interesting to see. I think a lot of the work's going to be done in the interview room, sitting down with Jeff Peterson.